I wanted to create a project that I could create in a weekend, just something that I get done in 2 days. And I came up with the idea of a softbox. I've always wanted a softbox to do product photography, just to try it out, see how I liked it. Nothing crazy. But I didn't want to spend a couple $100 on a professional light and a softbox to be able to do that. So I decided to make my own. I started in Fusion where I created a parametric base so I could change the number of sides, and in the end I settled on 8. I then extruded the base up to make an octahedral pyramid, which would form the shape of the cone, and I could cut out on my laser cutter and hollowed out the shape to the thickness of my material, which was 5mm. And then exported the face as an SVG and got ready for cutting. I first took some 5mm thick plywood and cut it down to size so it'd be easier to manage on my laser cutter. I was able to cut 2 panels at a time, and 4 passes would get me through the material, cleanly through the material, so that it would just fall out. I was really happy with this result, but there were some panels that needed some cleanup. The first 2 panels, I only did 3 passes, so I just needed to go with a knife and finish those cuts. I must have been rushing with the last panel because I only did 1 pass. For some reason, I must not have incremented the number of passes. So this one I had to cut out as well. Next, I went over to my planer and I set the angle to 22.5 degrees to create the octahedral pattern and glue these panels together. And then I made some test cuts to make sure that my theory would work. During editing, I noticed something severely wrong with my setup here. I will let this sequence play out, and if you're able to spot it, leave it in a comment down below. I'll point it out once the sequence is over. With all the angles correct, I marked the outside face of each panel so that way I could keep track on how I should be cutting. I ran each side over the planer and I flipped the panel end over end so that way I could see the outside face the entire time, and this ensured that I was cutting the angles correctly so that way they could fold onto each other. So for those of you that weren't able to spot the error, you can see it right here with the screw that is not fully seated. My planer is a hand planer that sits on a base upside down, and you lock it into place with a couple of bolts. This one bolt was not fully seated, and I obviously didn't realize, and it's a little puckering now realizing that it was like this the entire time, but this is what led to the severe angle underneath the fence against the planer. So lesson learned. Always make sure that your equipment is securely fastened and properly set up. Next, I taped all the edges and kind of did a dry run of how it would all fit together and made sure that, nothing was completely wrong. And then I took it all apart and I taped each panel with aluminum tape. This will help with the reflectiveness, and we will show the impact of this a bit later on. Next, I glued up the panels and clamped them as well as I could. It's a really hard shape, so you can't just use like a regular bar clamp or something to squeeze it together. There's no way to effectively apply pressure to all faces. So I kind of just hoped that the pressure of them leaning on each other would hold them together while the glue dried. I then cleaned any squeeze out and let the glue dry overnight. When I came back the next day, one edge was not glued together and another edge was only halfway glued. So I grabbed some thick CA glue and used this to strengthen these joints as well as fill in any space that couldn't be made up with just folding it closer together. From the same CAD model, I made a Bowens mount for the back. This will hold the panels more securely and allow a way to mount to a light source. After printing that out in PETG, I used a tube of 2-part epoxy to fill in the trench and placed all the panels on it. This was my first time using epoxy, and I was not ready for how stressful it would be. I needed a lot more epoxy than I thought, hence why I kept adding more, as well as the time crunch was brutal as I never worked with anything that set that quickly. After verifying that a light would mount to the softbox, I let the epoxy set again overnight. It really only needed probably about an hour, but I let it go overnight. And then I brought the softbox and the light into my office to see how it would perform. After adding a diffusion panel in front, it worked out quite well. The light that I'm using, you can clearly tell it's homemade, so I will quickly go over how I made that. The light itself is made of a cheap $10 LED cob light from Amazon, wired to 120 volts mains. I attached an old computer heatsink to keep it cool, as well as a 12 volt power supply for powering the fan, and I have some alligator clips coming out of that in case I wanted to power anything with 12 volts. I also added a cheap plastic lens in front of the light, so then just to help focus the light to make it go forwards and not outwards. This is clamped down with a 3D printed Bowens mount with the help of some M5 screws and nuts that can mount to the heatsink mounting points that are already built into it. I should note that the Bowens mount, even though the mount for the light itself is my design, the Bowens mount part of this isn't my design, and I pulled it off of printables. I'll leave a link to that down below. How does this Softbox work? Well, we're looking at it right now, but here's a comparison for you. First up is a 6-watt LED panel. Next is just the light with no cone and no diffusion. And next is with the cone but no diffusion, and the cone with diffusion. These images are a bit overexposed. I didn't expose them correctly, but I'm also using the light now, so you can tell me how you think it looks. I think this project went great. I kind of went over the weekend deadline. Really, the problem was glue and epoxy setting as well as just life. So I think 5 days is a good second place option. But I'm really happy with the design. It's not collapsible, which makes it kind of a pain to store, but I got a spot for it, so that's okay. And all in all, I'm really happy with it, and I can't wait to use it in the future. So I hope you found this project interesting and get inspired by it to do something similar. Thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.